Welcome to the Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Jake Martin. For over 50 years, the LSI team has been dedicated to the science of business development. We have seen the impact of our work and how it has evolved into economic development and now social impact. This week, Sean meets with Rhonda Perkes. They discuss her background and her enlightening experiences while working with the former representative Chris Stewart and the recently elected Celeste Maloy. Let's dive in.
Thank you for making time. I know you're in high demand, especially right now, middle of election season. But I had this great meeting with Congressman Maloy last week, and she could not have been more complimentary of your support and our common friend, the former Congressman Chris Stewart, as you know, has really attributed a lot of his success to your work. And yet, you're quietly pulling all the strings behind the scenes. What, which I want to talk about, but what is it that led you to this? And maybe you could just talk about yourself and your background and how
Sure.
too.
Yeah. Well, you and I went to high school together, although for a long time I thought you were a year older than me. And I always say it's because I think you were skiing every day instead of going to school at Bountiful High with me. But we didn't really pal around in the same circles, but we connected years later. And I knew Josh Johnson, who works for LSI, also went to school with us, and I did know him, and did some school activities with Josh, and just thought a lot of him as well. So it was really fun for the three of us to kind of connect, through policy a little bit years and years later. That was just really, really fun. But you and I kind of first connected through Hill Air Force Base when I was there with the community partners group that Hill puts together. And you had done some work with Top of Utah Military Affairs Committee as well. So we were able to connect on a lot of those meetings. And I was always there representing Chris Stewart. And then I kind of got to know you and the work that you did there with LSI. And I know that you have been involved with business development in Utah, and particularly with organizations that work through, DOD and up there at Hill. So I've just thoroughly enjoyed getting to know you and the things that LSI does.
Yeah, all those years ago, who would have thought that we would connect and bring Josh to the party as well?
So yeah, it's pretty cool, really. It's pretty cool that the three of us sort of had all these intersectional activities all through the years. It's been pretty cool.
For years, I would go to Washington, D.C. every month, and when Josh was in the House, I would go see him, and when he moved over and was working in the Senate and on the committees, I'd be there every month and connect with him. And, and he said to me, what's the story with this Congressman, Chris Stewart? And I said, you will love this guy. Because we had known Chris when he was at Shipley and had worked together closely. And I said, you will love this guy. He is amazing. And he was. And so maybe talk about, first of all, I didn't realize that you were not from Bountiful originally. You moved there when you were
14. So I really consider myself from Bountiful, but my parents had 5 kids, and they moved around quite a lot when they had a young family. So yeah, I kind of lived all over when I was small, but my dad settled in Bountiful and worked up at Hill Air Force Base as a civilian. And so I went to junior high and high school in Bountiful. So I'm back now. So I consider myself from, Davis County.
And you moved away for a bit, right? Were you in
a little bit? Well, I went up to college at Utah State, and then my husband and I moved to Albuquerque, New Mexico for a while, and he had a job there, and That's we had our first two children. I was just staying home, raising a family, but we desperately wanted to get back to family and Utah. There's just no place like home.
What in the world led you into politics and policy in general, which is, I think you're one of the most talented. I mean, I tell people this all the time. You have such an amazing ability to pivot based on whatever you're working on, whether it's a campaign, whether it's strategy or policy. You have got this amazing talent that I've worked with a lot of staffers and consultants over the years in this area, and you've really got a talent.
Well, thank you. That's so nice to hear. And I really consider myself a PR person more than I do a policy person, which is really unusual actually in politics. When you talk to most people who staff members of the delegation or who work in politics, most of them, their true love is policy. My true love is people. And so I'll just kind of briefly kind of go through my story a little bit. So I've always been interested in politics always. I never remember a time where I wasn't really interested in politics. Really more so even than history, which I love history, but I loved watching the State of the Union I mean, I just kind of had the weird genetic defect where I like politics, but I didn't go to school at Utah State. I went to school in education, not political science, because I wanted to be with people. I wanted to teach and be with kids, and I taught school for a while. But I
What?
palled around.
You taught
At
school for
Utah.
what?
I did for like 3 years. I taught elementary school. That was kind of my very first career.
What grade?
I taught first grade, fourth grade, third grade.
Yes.
I kind of
Okay, we love
bounced
that.
around for a while. It was great. But in college, my husband had grown up with the Stewarts, with the family of Chris Stewart. Now, he didn't know Chris because they had 10 kids. The Stewart family had 10 kids, and Chris was kind of grown and out of the house by the time he was kind of palling around with Tim Stewart. And so when I got up to Utah State and met Darren, my husband, we all kind of palled around together with Tim. And I loved Tim because Tim would sit and talk politics with me. And, when you are kind of interested in politics, there's not a lot of people that'll sit and talk to you about it. But he would sit and talk to me about politics, and I loved it. And we stayed in contact over the years. So when Chris Stewart decided to run, I think Tim gave him my name. I'm sure that's how it happened, because I got a call out of the blue one day from Chris Stewart, and he asked me. He said, "I have made the decision to run for Congress. You don't know me." And I said, "I actually do know you because I've read your books." So I knew who he was, and I obviously knew Tim, and I loved the family. I had known the parents a little bit. So I said, "Well, it's an open seat, and there's like 14 people running for that seat." So I wanted to meet him and interview him. So I went over to his office and we sat down for a while and talked. And I just came away with I was so impressed. I said, "Yeah, we've got to help put you in a congressional seat." I loved that he had military background. I loved that he had small business background. I loved that he was raised farming and ranching, because District 2, as you know, is full of rural areas. And the plight of the farmer and rancher is extraordinarily important to, District 2 and the nation. So I helped him on that campaign, but I was not certainly the manager or anything. I worked really hard, kind of got to know the process. And that was in 2011, 2012. And then in 2014, we kind of did the same thing. We kind of ran an election again. And after the 2014 election, I said, "I think I'd like to come over onto the official side and learn some campaign or some official works and learn what congressional work is." So he found a spot for me, and I went to work for him, and it was amazing. And I've told you before, I loved that job from day one to the very last day, because he gave me the autonomy to just go out and meet with people and help him know what they needed and help them know what he could do for them. And so that was a beautiful thing. And as someone that loves people, I was just kind of the PR person in the office. So I interacted with chambers and obviously Hill Air Force Base and all kinds of state agencies, and I interacted with the state legislators that were in our district, and went and met with business leaders. So it was just, for me, for someone that loves to be with people, it was amazing to learn the different types of legislation that affected all of these organizations. And then I would kind of try to connect them, and sometimes I couldn't help them, sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't, but it was all around just amazing. And I felt like him and I had just the perfect, organization, because he could kind of go do all the policy stuff, and then I could help at the district office with all the people stuff.
One of the things that you and I have talked about a lot is Chris was exactly the person that you saw on TV and when you met him in person. He had no ego, and he was just dedicated to serving his constituents and doing the right thing. And I always admired that about him, and I know that that's why you were there as long as you were.
Yeah, for sure. He was a very rare politician.
I agree.
He never cared about the accolades that came from what he did. He served tirelessly on the Intel Committee, which brought with it a set of challenges that is a really unique committee in Congress, because you can't come out of the Intel Committee and say to your constituents, this is what I've done. Most of the things are classified that they discuss and do. It's a committee that they just don't talk about a lot. They talk, they go in and they meet and discuss all of these challenging things that are going on throughout the world, and they just can't talk about it. So that was really challenging. But he also was on the Appropriations Committee, and that was a little more fun. We could kind of talk about some of the things there, and it was, normally a congressman would never get asked to be on both of those committees. Those are A committees. You and I know that means that, they're two of the most important committees. And typically a speaker would never put a congressman on two A committees like that. But he was so respected and just really just was a workhorse. And he did, as you said, he just had no ego. He did not really care about having people sing his praises. He just wanted to do the work of the people. And I did love that about him. And he was also such a great boss, because he just kind of would say, go do your work. This is what I expect, and we'll have a meeting every week where you can report, but you go make the job your own. And I loved that. I loved that about him.
What I thought was interesting in watching how you interfaced with the DC office and the district was really unique as well. I mean, I don't think people understand how the resources available to them in the district office, and you orchestrated so much of that. And then you go and do a campaign, and seems like every year you're like, okay, we won, let's get started on the next campaign. And you just could pivot so seamlessly. And I know that there was a lot of sleepless nights and hard work you just made it look effortless.
Well, thank you. So you have to be really careful on when you work for a federally elected politician, member of Congress. You have to be careful when you campaign. You can never have your official work and anything you do on the campaign side really mix. You have to do all of your work sort of separate on the official side, because you can get into a lot of trouble. Obviously, staffers are paid with taxpayer dollars. So everything has to be separate. And that is a little bit tricky. I kept very, very close track of my hours. But my salary, fluctuated a little bit because when I wanted to do campaign work, we would change it so that I didn't have to that I didn't have to work so many hours on the official side. So, I was doing about half and half, but some members of Congress just, they won't allow it. They just, feel like you would have to be too organized to keep track. But like I was able to do that, and it worked. It worked well. And I liked campaign work, and I liked official work. And I always like to mention when I talk to people that everyone should know that their congressional office and their US Senate office works for them and can do things that a lot of people will go out and pay an attorney for. So immigration issues, Social Security, veterans benefits, IRS issues, anything like that, passports, your congressional office can help you. And we had several people that just did casework all day long. That's all they did. And they worked for constituent. It's all free. And people should know that and be able to take advantage of that when they come up against, challenges with any federal agencies that they have to deal with.
That's a great point. And there are so many resources available to anybody that needs help from their congressman, congresswoman, senator, and I promise you, if you go into your district office, you'll have a great experience. You will be welcomed and have members of the staff guide you through whatever issues that you may be looking for. And I think that's a great point that people forget. I can go into my representative's office and discuss issues at a federal level if it's a federal issue that they could help me with.
Yeah. And I was a little sad, I have to say, when I first started working in the congressional office in 2014, it really was like that, where we would just have people walk in, no one would set an appointment. People would walk in, we would sit down with them. It was, the door was always open. And then when Steve Scalise got shot, they kind of cracked down on security a little bit. And they asked all of the congressional offices to get, security systems, and they asked us to, ask for appointments. And so it changed things a little bit. And it's great, and it's organized, and people can still make an appointment, come in. But I did hate losing that, a little bit, that like 100% open door policy, just, come in between 9 to 5 and anytime you want, someone will always be there. And someone is always in the office, but it has changed a little bit. That experience changed our office a little bit. And, they, to their credit, the House wanted to protect their members of Congress. So they asked us to, put a few more security things into place. But it doesn't change the fact that you can always call your office and set up an appointment and go in.
Exactly. Looking back on your work with Chris Stewart, was there any project that stands out? All of the legislation that was passed and the coordination with the district, is there anything that you can think of that this was really a memorable project that you worked with Chris?
Well, number one has to be 988. There were just so many things about working on that piece of legislation. And like I said, I was not ever the policy person or the legislative person there, but just watching that process, because it took 5 years, and mental health was not something Congressman Stewart really set out to focus on when he first got elected. But the veterans piece of that really spoke to him. We have just a tremendous number of veterans in this country that commit suicide. It's heartbreaking. And that was a big piece of getting the 988 suicide hotline, the legislation for that passed. But there were 3 silos of legislation that we kind of had to work on. So one was the veterans piece. We wanted we wanted the VA to be highly involved in that and on board 100% of the way. The second piece was the telecom piece, because you don't just throw out a 3-digit number. I mean, it has to go through hundreds and hundreds of, check boxes and approvals to get the telecom piece approved for that. And then, of course, the third piece was working with the national mental health organizations. So all of that had to be coordinated. Cam Madsen in our office did a beautiful job coordinating with all of those organizations, but it did take a full 5 years to get that, into place. And, there's still counties that are kind of, it's in place and the process is rolling, but there's still counties that are kind of working through some of the kinks of this. So it was a long process, but I think in the long run, that is going to be something that is here forever to stay. And I can say that it's certainly going to make a difference for the people that use it. And so that was probably my number one. And then the second one was something I was more involved in, and that is getting the Congressional Gold Medal for the Ghost Army. Yeah. That was a real personal one for me. We had a gal, and her name's Madeline Christensen. She was only about 14, and it was her great grandfather that was the World War II vet in Utah. And he was alive at the time when she started advocating for this. And it caught the eye of, and her advocacy caught the eye of a documentary filmmaker who had done a documentary on the Ghost Army. So for people that may be listening that don't know what this was a unit in World War II, and their whole job was to kind of be a decoy. So they would use these tanks that were just full of air. It was like, blowing up a beach ball, but it was shaped like a tank, and they'd set up and they'd paint sets. I mean, they had soldiers in this unit that had come from an art background, an acting background, and their whole purpose was, to set up a decoy so that as the enemy came in, they thought the Americans were at one place and really they were over in another place. And they really put their lives at risk because they were the decoy. So this was just a tremendous story, and there weren't very many of them left. And when we started working on that legislation, it was, and I just couldn't believe. I thought, well, we'll do this and it'll get great bipartisan support. And it was not easy, but we are still to this day, they've got the legislation passed, but we're still waiting for the actual ceremony. And I think it is set to happen I want to say it's August. It's this summer. It's going to happen. But we only have a few guys left. I think there's maybe 6 or 7 of them left that will actually be there to get that award in person. And the one that was here in Utah has passed away, but his family is thrilled that, he's going to get that, posthumously. And anyway, it was great. And that was fun because I got to work on that a little bit. So I loved it.
That's both are amazing pieces of legislation, and appreciate you sharing that. Rhonda, if you look back on the campaigns that you ran for Chris, were there any, I know how you are. I know that you stress about every detail and you've got this strategist mindset of looking at a campaign and making sure that every possible outcome you have an answer for that. I think it's amazing. Was there any of Chris's campaigns that you ran that really you were concerned about?
Well, I think you're always concerned. You never can take anything for granted, and you never can rest on your laurels during a campaign. You always have to be working, and nothing is, ever, for sure. No, there's nothing that's ever for sure. And so, yeah, I do remember being worried. I never was super worried because people really liked Chris, but I always worried that I couldn't get him to in front of as many people as I needed to. That was always my worry, because once people met Chris Stewart, they loved Chris Stewart, but they had to meet him and interact with him sometimes, and before they were, sold. And when you're a congressman, you don't have a lot of time. I mean, you're 85% of your time is in DC. Campaigning is difficult. And so, he had a million things going on. So that was more of my worry, is how am I going to organize this campaign while he is in Washington, DC? This is hard. And so,
And he hated it, right? I know he hated fundraising, and I think he loved the work. He loved serving and felt like this was something he was good at, and he was, but hated the fundraising piece. He hated the campaigning piece.
Well, he didn't hate campaigning. Chris actually liked getting in front of people. He did. I mean, fundraising is a different animal. It's hard to ask people for money. I mean, I have never met a congressman that says, I love the fundraising piece. That's hard. That is tough. And you have to have money to run a campaign. And, by the end, this is advice he would give me, right? By the end, he was saying, we got to raise money and buy ads, raise money and buy ads. And it takes money to run a campaign. So but it's not the most fun part. But in terms of actual campaigning, he actually did like getting in front of people. He liked it quite a lot. He just didn't have a ton of time to do it. And our district is huge, so going from Farmington, where he lived, which was the very northern part of our district, all the way down to St. George. And I mean, we had parts of Sanpete County and, all of those counties in between. It was hard. It was hard to figure out how to, use your time as wisely as you needed to get from, the top of the district down to the bottom of the district. And I think he didn't enjoy that as much, but he liked it when we could get him in front of people. And, through COVID, we really got pretty perfect at doing the teletown hall, which turned out to be a great tool for us and, for him on the official side as well. And, you just start dialing people, and if people can join, they join. And that turned out to be great.
Yeah. You probably know this, but I doubt that there has been a representative U.S. representative in the last 50 years that has consistently had such support as Chris has had during his time in the Congress. He consistently would be the Utah delegate with the most votes. And even in some strong incumbent races, he would always have this solid support. And I think so much of that was the work that you did to ensure that he would win these campaigns.
Well, I did work hard. He had a great staff. And this is one thing. I mean, this because this translates to the business world too. When you have a great boss, you tend to keep great staff. And there are a lot of, Congress people out there whose staff turns over a lot. They have a lot of turnover in staff. But when you have someone that is a great leader, you keep these great staff. And we did not have a ton of turnover in staff. And I think people liked that. They knew who they needed to go to and work with in the office. And I think it's worth mentioning that the process of elections in the state of Utah changed while Chris Stewart was in office. We used to only have the convention system in the state of Utah, and there was all of this upheaval and controversy about SB 54 and getting another path to the ballot. And that all happened while he was in office, and he never did collect signatures. And, you can argue that one way or another. And there were years that I said to him, I think we need to have the backup plan. I think we need to get the signatures. And he just would always say, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to spend my hard-earned campaign money on buying signatures. And if I can't win a convention, then I don't deserve to be a congressman. That's what he would say to me. But he was also an incumbent during those years. And so, I think he was able to do that. And he always did so well at convention. He always just did great at convention. And so, but I think that's worth mentioning, that he never gathered signatures.
What is your position on signatures and versus the convention and delegate process? What do you think that there needs to be a change in this policy with the Utah elections?
Well, I have thought about this a lot. I have thought about this a lot, and I will say, so in 2012, when I helped on Chris's election, I wasn't managing at that time, but I loved the fact that we could go in and run this campaign with what we had, raise money, and you could still have a chance of winning without being wealthy. I loved that about the caucus convention system, because we had at the time, I think we had less than 800 delegates, I think, that we had to campaign to. It's closer to 1,000 now, because Utah has grown. So it's closer to 1,000 now in congressional districts. But I'm not opposed. I'm not really 100% opposed to a second path to the ballot. I wonder a little bit about the number of signatures that you have to get. I mean, I look at a statewide race with 28,000 signatures. I mean, that is almost insurmountable unless you put some money into getting those. I mean, I just don't know if that would even be possible with volunteers, 28,000 to get those signatures without paying for them. And so then you look at, well, then we're kind of, back to spending a bunch of money to get on the ballot. So, there's all these things, but then if you lower the threshold of signatures, then some people will argue that it becomes like a jungle primary. So I don't know. I do think that there's still a place for having those discussions in the legislature. So, but it is what it is right now. And so we'll go with it.
So when you worked on Chris's first campaign, and I had thought that you were the campaign manager, I did not know that you were working under another team. But did you ever have any discussions with Jim Matheson, who was the incumbent? That we, as you may know, I think I've told you this, we were working closely with Jim Matheson on a number of projects, and he just, I think, surprised everybody by saying, no, I'm not going to run. I really had this idea that he was either going to run for governor or had some other political aspirations. But did he ever interface with Chris or the team? And did you ever figure out why he didn't run?
No, not that I know of. That was a great day though for us. I mean, because we were kind of gearing up, right, to run against him, and we knew that was going to be a big hurdle. And so, we were kind of talking about how that was going to happen, what our strategy was going to be, and then he decided not to run. And I don't know. We think it had maybe something to do with the fact that the district looked a little different that year. Redistricting happens every 10 years, and you have to take a look. Your constituency changes. And so we think maybe, it was just, he didn't love it. We don't know if he didn't love what it looked like. I mean, it's hard when you've been campaigning to one group of people and then your group changes, you lose some of the power of the incumbency. So I don't know. I don't know if Chris ever talked to him, not that I know of, but maybe there was a private conversation. I don't know, but there was certainly not with me. But yeah, I didn't come on to actually manage to be the campaign manager until 2020 and then 2022. So I managed those last 2 terms.
So I can remember having this conversation with our mutual friend Josh Johnson, who said, "Listen, we have got to get Rhonda on our team." And so, I had talked to you several times about leaving the district office, and you always would say no. But I think the funniest thing was one time I was having lunch with Chris Stewart, and he took me aside. Like, we had this great meeting. We were going to solve all of these issues within the district, and he was going to run legislation for us. And he took me aside at the end of that meeting, and he said, "Stop trying to hire Rhonda." And I said, "Okay." So he and every time I had met with him, he was so complimentary of you and his whole staff. I mean, he was so humble and so appreciative of the work that you did. And I really admired that he was loyal to you and you were loyal to him all those years. And I mean, every time I talked to Josh, he'd say, "We have got to get Rhonda on our team." And I kept saying, "No, she will never leave Chris." And sure enough, and then
To the
you and
bitter
I
end.
talked that in May of last year when Chris announced that he was going to resign. I mean, tell me what was going through your head at that point, because you had just worked the campaign. We had worked with his team, Cam and Connor and the rest of the team, to get him on the defense subcommittee for appropriations, which was huge. I was so excited about that. Okay, this is going to be a great session, and get this bombshell that
Yeah.
he's
It was kind of a bombshell. And I say to people, I was surprised, but I wasn't shocked. And the reason I say that is because, I'm not gonna get into any, personal information, that's Chris Stewart's information to have and give. But uh, his wife had been dealing with some health challenges for quite some time, and I think they thought they were maybe at the tail end of them, and then as it turned out, they weren't. And so he had made this decision, and anyway, he came to us and just said, I'm not going to finish the term. I have to have some time at home and help my wife get healthy. And so, the staff, I mean, we were, like I said, we were all really surprised, but we were also supportive, and we wanted him to feel like, he could go and take care of things on the home front. And I've said this to people before. We didn't ever have any reason to second guess that decision. Chris Stewart always led his life in a way where he made decisions based on the right reasons. And so we all knew that, he had made that decision. I'm sure it was a very hard decision for him, but he had these great guiding principles in his life. And so, we all got on board and tried to wrap up things as best as we could before he left.
So the staff didn't come together and try to talk him out of this, or like, "Hey, can we work this at a different angle? Or are you going to at least finish out this term?" And then just because of his long standing integrity and honesty with the staff, the team just agreed that they were going to help him transition, and There was no
Yeah,
discussion.
I mean, really, really, that's how it was. And, when you work for a member of Congress, there's kind of some unspoken rules. And, one of them is when the person whose name is on the door makes a decision and that decision is final, you get behind it.
Yeah.
And, we just, yeah, I don't think anybody on the staff, begged him to make a different decision. I think he had thought long and hard about that beforehand, and we all knew it. And it was a personal matter for him. And so, yeah, we just said, okay, if this is going to happen, then we'll try and get as much done as we can before you leave. But yeah, I was surprised. I was really surprised, and I'm still a little sad about it. Really, I mean,
So am I.
yeah, I'm still, but we have Celeste, and I was just thrilled to see her get elected too.
So, I mean, this was such an amazing story that you ought to write a book about this. I was in Washington, uh, meeting with the number of the strategists, and they said, we're going to put Celeste Maloy in front of as the candidate to replace Chris. And I said, no way, that will never work. I think I told you that multiple times. And I, I mean, I just thought that the probability of win was zero. And especially with her opponents. I mean, you had the former Speaker of the House with a lot of name recognition throughout the state. You had the former House representative, Utah House representative, who had tons of name recognition and the funding that Celeste did not have. And I could not see that this was going to end well for Celeste. And what you did to make that happen was an absolute miracle. And so, I mean, talk about that. What was your relationship with Celeste in the office, and
So, okay,
why did you
so
agree
it
to this?
really, well, it really was, I mean, a miracle. But I mean, I've got to give most of the credit to her. She had great ideas. So, she was our general counsel, and she's told this story before. She had a great reputation in the state of Utah as a public lands attorney. She had worked for the Washington County Attorney's Office. She had worked for the Wasatch Water Conservancy, or I'm sorry, the Washington Water Conservancy District. She had worked for UAC as an attorney. So she had done all of these legal things in the state. And the thing I think that people didn't quite understand is that Celeste Maloy had interacted with thousands of people over the course of her legal career. I mean, she'd been an attorney for years and years, probably about 20 years, and she had interacted, I mean, literally with thousands of people in the state of Utah. So it wasn't like people say, well, she was such an unknown. Well, really not. I mean, really, she was not. I mean, she wasn't an elected official, but she had interacted with so many people, and she had these relationships all over the state because she was a public lands legal expert. So Chris Stewart, about 4 or 5 years ago, asked her to come and be his legal counsel. And as as we talked about before, he was on appropriations. He, was on these powerful committees on Intel, and he needed an attorney in the office. And we hadn't had one for a couple of years. We had a little break anyway. So he called her one day, and he knew her. He had worked on her with some issues in southern Utah with you know BLM and Forest Service. And anyway, he called her and said, I need an attorney in DC, and I'd like you to move to DC and be my legal counsel. And she turned him down. And then she was teaching a class at BYU, and the dean said, you turned him down? Like, you got to call him back and tell him you'll do it. That's a great opportunity. So she did eventually take the job. And so she was our legal counsel. So I didn't have a ton of interaction with Celeste, but I knew her and I had worked with her on some things, on some lands issues that we had actually here in Davis County. I had worked with her on. So she called me, and soon after she had decided to run, it wasn't right away. She had hired a general counsel or a general consultant. So, but she called me and said, I want you to work on my campaign, and I want you to kind of like take care of this and this and this in Northern Utah. And so I helped her. And then right after convention, she called me and just said, I want you to manage the campaign. And here's the thing. I like working for people that I know are in it for the right reasons. And I wanted to help her. And I didn't know if she was going to win. I thought she could win. I thought there was a path to victory, but I also knew there was a chance she would lose. And I was okay with that. I was okay with that because I did think she had a path to victory. And I thought if she works as hard as I think she can work, I think we could pull this off. And so I said, yeah, I'll manage your campaign. And man, we worked our tails off from convention to that, till after the primary. I mean, she was working, we were scheduling her 12 to 15-hour days every day. Cause again, we were driving, right? We were constantly driving from St. George to Farmington, to Salt Lake, to Iron County, I mean, all of these and every county in between, going out to Tooele and Grand County, Kane County, Miller County. I mean, all these counties. And I think we got to every county about 3 times. And then, someone on the team had this idea to go and debate with the other candidates in all 13 counties. And that was not my idea. I can't take the credit for that idea. And I, in fact, was terrified when they said that, because when she said, I think I'll do that, I can do that, I was terrified. And the reason is not because of the debating. I knew she could debate. I knew how hard it is to organize a debate, because when you organize debates, all of the other, candidates that are participating, their team they have to agree on all of the rules and, all the procedures you're going to follow. And when you talk about who's going to moderate, you've got to make sure that they're going to be non-biased. You don't ever want to be perceived as having someone come and moderate that's biased towards you or against you. So it's, you have to find a venue. I mean, it is just a ton of work. And so I was a little bit nervous about that, but we pulled it off. I had some great help and was completely blown away by the support that we had on those debates. I mean, in a lot of cases, standing room only, right, when we would have those. And it was just so nice to know that people wanted to make the right decision. They wanted to be informed.
You and I talked quite a bit during that period, and I mean, I don't think you took a day off in 5 months or something. And I was so proud of you when you, first of all, just getting through the convention. I mean, I thought that was going to be tough, and I'd love to hear your strategy for how you believe that you took the convention. But then after that, you never took a day off. I don't think Celeste slept more than a few hours every night for 5 months. And this will to win, especially from you, and Celeste's ability to endure that lot of nonsense was just remarkable.
Yeah. Well, okay. So a few things. So at convention, she was working with a consulting group at convention, and we just had her call. She was calling all day long delegates, because convention is a delegate game. So she, we had this list of 950 delegates, and she was just on the phone with them all the time. And I think this is really interesting, connecting with delegates. Delegates have great ideas and they have great things to say, and it's sometimes not a quick phone call. And she was so willing to listen when she could get somebody on the phone, she was so willing to listen to them. And I think it really resonated. And then, I do credit Win strategy for her to her. I mean, she wanted to engage rural Utah and she knew rural Utah. I mean, this was something that was just in her wheelhouse. And so, she just wanted to go and talk to ranchers and farmers and make sure that the county commissioners in those areas knew that she knew what they were dealing with. I mean, the state of Utah is owned by the federal government. I mean, 70%. I mean, this land, all these things happen on federal land that affects people that live just right around that land. And she knew all of this. So she really wanted to engage rural Utah. It was amazing. So one of the things that people really remember about her is we had a couple of these haystacks that had these great big giant, we put these big vinyl like a billboard, but we put them on haystacks. And how that came to be is she had a farmer friend that kind of farmed right off of I-15 down, between Cedar City and Beaver. And he said, what if I put a banner for you like a billboard, but I'll put it on the side of my barn? So that was the original idea, is we were going to put it on the side of the barn. And so we had this big banner made. We got the dimensions of his barn and we had this banner made and we took it out to him and he put it on the barn. And we kind of he realized that it wasn't actually super visible from the freeway because it was far enough away from I-15 that you couldn't really see it. So he went and stacked all of his, hay. He went and stacked it right by the freeway and he put the banner on this haystack. And people started talking about this haystack and this banner and like how amazing it was and, such a unique idea. And it was his idea. And so then we did one on a couple of others, going out to Lake Powell. And so she kind of got known. And so anyway, when it came time to name her leadership pack, we did name it the Haystack Pack. So
Love it.
Anyway, it was great. But I do want to say, as important as that was, she also was very engaged in the urban areas too. And so just to kind of bring those all together, it was great. It was fun. And there are very few candidates anywhere that could keep up the rigors of what she did. I couldn't believe it. I mean, there were nights she slept for 2 or 3 hours. Yeah.
I know.
More than a handful of nights that, she was like up at 3 on the road so that she could be at a 9 a.m. meeting in Davis County. I mean, it was, because her home is in Cedar City.
Right. I have watched a lot of campaigns and we're in the middle of campaign season now. And I think a lot of candidates and especially incumbents have this idea, I'm going to pay somebody to go do that for me. And you can't. And I loved that you had this strategy that you said to her, this is what we're going to work. This is how this is going to look. And she agreed to all of your recommendations and she did it. And it wasn't, she didn't have a DC-based consulting team saying, we'll make this happen for you. She was out there doing that and you were pulling the strings. And I'm really proud of you. And I think I've told you this before. I just did not want to like Celeste. I had a long relationship with Greg Hughes, the former Speaker of the House. We had worked a lot of Utah issues together. I had worked with Becky Edwards on so many committees, especially economic development, and had a long relationship with Becky. And I just thought, is this the right choice? And the more I've worked with her, and you have been very instrumental in this as well, that I see so many of the traits that I saw in Chris that she has a lot of integrity. She is not trying to be everything to all people. She really is concerned about supporting the needs of her constituents in her district first and foremost. And yeah, I mean, she probably could have been on a lot of different committees, and she decided that land, natural resources, and small business were the most important matters for her constituents. And I really admire that. And the more I've worked with her and gotten to know her, I really like what she's doing, especially focused on her constituents, which I think a lot of our representatives have lost.
Yeah, that's for sure true. She grew up in a little town in Nevada that was a mining town. And so she really saw firsthand what public land policy could do for a family, in and how it could hurt a family if the policy was not in place, the correct policies. So, she has a great vested interest in public lands and how it affects constituents. And I think it's so great. They put her on the small business committee, and I love that. I love that because she is gonna learn so much about what helps and hurts her constituency. Small business affects all of us, as you know. And so I love that. And yeah, she's great. And I have to say, when she decided to run, it's like you said, there were some names that were household names that were running, and they were people that I liked. And that's hard. That's a hard part of politics, right? That's a hard part of politics to say, I'm going to run against, or I'm going to run, I guess, for the same seat that someone I admire is also running for. But the reason I do it is because I do think that every great candidate needs somebody by their side that is kind of cheering them on, helping them make good decisions, helping them know what kinds of things are important to do and how to connect with those constituents. And everybody needs somebody like that. Every candidate needs somebody that's really rooting for them. And I just have picked a couple of candidates that I've wanted to do that for. And like I said, I never want to dwell on, what if we lose, but I pick candidates that I say, I want to support this candidate, win or lose. And if things don't work out, I'm going to be okay, but I want to help this candidate. So that's kind of what I've done. That's kind of how I've made my decisions.
I think you're so humble in this, looking back on it. Rhonda, I do not, I mean, if I'm sure there has been a underdog that has come from behind and won, but I cannot remember anyone who had such a difficult path to victory. And so much of that is mindset. And when I see that, when I see somebody that is determined to win, that's incredible and is rare. And you supporting Celeste and Celeste's hard work it really is one of the true remarkable political stories in our state's history. And you need to write that down, because people are going to forget. You serve one term in the House, and people forget what happened that made this successful. And it's such
Well,
it is
a great story. And I do have to also, never forget that Chris Stewart also supported her. And that was huge for a lot of people. And he didn't have to do that. He wanted to do that. And that is that he went out on a limb, to support her. But she had been a great employee for him. And I mean, I only say he went out on a limb because anytime you endorse someone, you have to think about the people running against that person that you're going to have to work with in the future. And so, but I was just thrilled that he was willing to do that. And he thought enough of her to say, yeah, I'm going to get behind her and I'm going to encourage people to vote for her. And I'm going to endorse her. That was huge for her campaign. So I have to give some credit to Chris Stewart.
So you're the Muhammad Ali of campaigns. You've never lost. What now?
Knock on wood.
What's your plans?
So as it turns out, I have to turn around and run Celeste Maloy's campaign again this year because she was in office for a whopping 8 weeks before she had to turn around and file to run. No, I think it was more like, let's see, she was sworn in the last week in November, and she had to file to run the first week in January. So it was like 5 weeks.
That's unbelievable.
So 5 weeks. And anyway, and it's going to be another hard campaign. So that's really what I'm focused on right now, is that I'm doing a little bit of contract work as well. But I'm really, really focused on, for the first half of 2024, I'm going to be very, very focused on Celeste's campaign.
Right. If you were to give advice to anyone either running or working a campaign, what is that? What would you think is the key element of a successful campaign?
Well, hard work is number one, and integrity is right up there, number one too. I mean, I don't know how I could choose between hard work and integrity, but I think if you have both of those things, you're going to have a great campaign. Campaigns are tricky. Your candidate doesn't always win, but you have to work hard and you have to be willing to answer questions, and you can't be everything to everyone. I would say you have to decide where you're at, what your political ideology is, and why. You have to be able to back it up. And if you can do that, you have some strong answers for people. Even if you disagree with them, you have to be able to back up your beliefs. And campaigning is hard. You cannot sail through a campaign. You just cannot. You have to be able to interact with the public. And if you don't love interacting with people, public office is probably not for you.
And you can't buy it. That's what I keep saying. You have to go do it.
Yeah. You have to do it. Yep, you have to do it.
I admire your work so much, as you know, and not just the campaigns that you have won and that gets a lot of the attention, but also your work in the district and making things happen. And I have admired what you've accomplished and have been so lucky to work with you over the years. And I really appreciate you spending this time this afternoon. And you've got our full support with Celeste's campaign and the other campaigns you're working. And I know you're going to be successful like you always are. You're amazing.
Well, thank you. And I have just appreciated your friendship over the years. You have always been just a great cheerleader for me and someone I can kind of call and bounce ideas off of. And I've just enjoyed that you've made it a point to stay in contact. And I just want you to know that I hear great things about LSI wherever I go. You have a great reputation, and it's just really been fun to work with you. And I know that you and I will work together in the future as well.
Sure. Thanks, Rhonda. You were amazing.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Such a pleasure.
See ya.
Take care. Bye-bye.